Hello, finance students. I asked the question from ChatGPT. As you all know, we have 30 companies in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and you all have one of these companies, assigned to. And I wanted to know which one of them has the highest weighted average cost of capital. What does that mean? We already had a comprehensive lecture, not comprehensive, I would say, a lecture about this issue. And to understand what the cost of capital is, that means whenever you want to raise money, how much does it cost you? Suppose you want to buy a car. When you go to bank, the bank will tell you they will charge you 14% interest. The cost to you, cost of raising money to buy the car is 14%. However, someone who has a better credit goes to bank and the bank charges that person 10%. Therefore, the cost of capital to that person is less than the cost of capital to you. In our example of restaurant, imagine that you need to borrow $200,000. A doctor comes and says he or she wants to be a partner and is giving you $100,000, but he or she is expecting 20% return on his or her money. That means out of 100,000 that he is or she is putting, that person wants 20% back every year, means 20,000 profit he or she wants. Therefore, the cost of capital to raise money for that doctor is 20%. You need another 100,000. You go to bank and borrow. The bank will tell you that it would charge you 10%. The doctor says gives you 100,000, wants 20%, and the bank also gives you 100,000, but the bank charges you interest of 10%. If I ask you what the weighted average cost of capital to you is, because each one of them is giving you an equal amount of 100,000, therefore that means 50% comes from the doctor, 50% comes from the bank. Therefore, your cost of capital is neither 20% nor 10%. It is exactly in the middle, which is 15%. That's the cost of capital, the raising capital to you when you want to borrow money. Therefore, each company has its own weighted average cost of capital. And I wanted to see which one of the companies in the 30 Dow Jones, companies that we know of, which one has the highest weighted average cost of capital. There is a company in one of those 30 companies is called DOW, Dow Inc. Please note that this name is a kind of confusion. This Dow is a chemical company. And this chemical company doesn't have anything to do with the name that we call Dow Jones. Dow Jones most likely is a name of, some people that lived maybe 120 years ago, and those people established that index of putting, stocks of companies together and created that index. This name is different than that Dow Jones that you hear. It's the name of the company. As you see, I asked ChatGPT which one of those 30 companies has the highest weighted average cost of capital, and that is approximately 7.3%. Means that when it gets loan and when it brings partners like doctor, this company brings partners, means shareholders like doctor, the doctor is hoping to get 9.55%, 9.55% back. But, this company also can raise money through maybe the bank to borrow. That drops it a little and brings it to 7.3%. Therefore, this company, among the 30 components of those 30 companies, has the highest weighted average cost of capital. It costs them more when they want to borrow money. Now, why it is so? Why, it's because the creditors, the banks maybe are charging them more interest. When someone buys their shares that buyer is hoping to get a higher return. Maybe this is a risky company, there are different factors. Doesn't mean necessarily it's a bad company. It's just a number that I want you to think. I asked ChatGPT to see which company has here it is. Do you see the cost of debt? When they borrow, they have to pay 6%. When they bring, they issue shares, for example, the shareholders, the new shareholders are expecting 9.55%. On average, it becomes 7.3%. Let's not forget this 7.3 might not necessarily be a number exactly in the middle of this, because it depends on what percentage. In terms of the doctor and the bank, we said 50% of the money comes from the doctor, 50% from the bank. Therefore, that is the weight of, distribution is the same between those two. Therefore, it would be exactly in the middle. And also the amount of money that we borrowed, 100,000, that's why it came. But now we go to another company that has a weighted average cost of capital, which is 7.54%. That's a one lucky company, which means when they want to, raise money, when they bring new shareholders, those new shareholders do not expect too much of a big return, which is great. It doesn't cost this company significantly to bring a new, to issue new shares and raise capital. And thus, yes, Goldman Sachs is an investment bank. Therefore, it's a banking business. And therefore, and also, when they borrow, they are not paying. And I asked ChatGPT to compare this with the industry, that which one of them is doing better than the industry. If you look at here, the Dow Jones, is doing, as its weighted average cost of capital is 7.3%. Another chemical company, let's say DuPont is another chemical company. The other companies have a cost of capital which is slightly higher. Therefore, chemical companies overall have a higher weighted average cost of capital. But among them, actually, this Dow Inc., this company, has a little bit less, weighted average cost of capital. And regarding Goldman Sachs, 5.74, industry average generally is 7.54. Therefore, they are doing right, consistent with the rest of the, investment banks. And it has put here, and here it is. Dow Inc. weighted average cost of capital is 7.3%. In the industry average, means in the chemical companies, usually they have 7.63. Slightly they have, less return. A less cost of capital. And here Goldman Sachs is right at the target. Industry has the same. I wanted you to understand the weighted average cost of capital, and hope you as a finance student in your personal life find a way to, reduce the weighted average cost of capital to yourself. What does it mean? Having a better credit is going to, reduce the cost of raising capital. Means if one day you want to go and buy a house, you pay lower interest rates because you have a good credit. And therefore, these are the numbers that companies constantly look to, because companies constantly need money. They have to raise money to, expand and, they issue new shares, they bring new partners, or that means that's called equity financing. When they bring new owners through issuing shares, that's called equity financing. When they go to bank and borrow, that's the debt financing. Therefore, we want you to be familiar with this concept.